Welcome to Align Yourself podcast by Ebony Rose, a podcast where we have deep and eye-opening conversations with some inspiring individuals. I'm a mum with a wild past, and over the last few years, I've been on a journey transforming from a maiden to a mother, unlearning and relearning everything I thought I once knew, realizing we really know nothing at all. So come with me whilst I share my journey, have some sober D&Ms, and be prepared to have your mind blown. Welcome back to Align Yourself podcast. I am Ebony Rose, and if you're here, I know it's because you're open-minded, passionate about life, personal growth, challenging your own thoughts and beliefs. Today's conversation is going to change the way you view birth, the woman's body, soul, and purpose. You'll gain a new perspective on the powers of birth, what it really holds. Today, I have one of my dearest friends, one of the most inspiring women I have in my life. She has guided me, held me, and supported me through both of my pregnancies and shown us how to reclaim birth and fully step into our powers as parents, bringing our babies into our own arms. Naf has shown me what sisterhood is, what women supporting women means, and guided me over the years on how to truly surrender and trust in myself. Naf, every conversation we have, I wish has been recorded. Your views on the world, your trust in women, your trust in me has been a catalyst for my own journey into motherhood. So thank you so much for being with me today. So for the person sitting with us, what would be one thing to take away from our conversation around birth? What would it be?
Wow, thank you so much. That's so beautiful for you to say that, and I receive it. Thank you, Nun. The one takeaway would be for women in birth, like, know your rights. Know what your rights are before you even go into birth, because regardless of where you choose to give birth, I think there's a lot of misconceptions or miscommunications, and there's a lot of things that women assume or take for granted because it's what they've heard, like, well, this is how you do it, or you have to do this and you've got to do that. Do you know what I mean? When actually that's not the case. And, the law actually protects you, even though, when you're talking in the birth circles, it might not seem like that, but it's actually about knowing what your rights are in childbirth. There is an organisation that was started by a human rights lawyer here in Australia. It's called Human Rights in Childbirth. So as a starting point, just start from there, because we know there's a lot of bad things, horrible things that are happening, that are being done to women in birth, under the guise of medical help, or, this has to happen because, to save your life and the baby's life, etc. When a lot of the times when you unpack it, you can see where those sort of things, one can be prevented purely if they had just listened to the mum and afforded her, the right to informed consent, basically.
Yeah, wow. So can you take us back to the beginning of your journey into becoming a midwife?
And just so that everyone knows, I'm no longer a registered midwife. I handed in my registration voluntarily in August 2000, end of August 2022. And yeah, I did it with a lot of relief, and it was due to the fact of so many complaints made by other health professionals, not the women, other health professionals, complaints about me to AHPRA, and it started from really at the beginning of COVID, and then by the time it got to 2022, I think it was like the 7th reporting or something like that. I was like, oh my God, it was a massive, big, soul searching journey, but when I reflect back from the beginning, it was always inevitable, because, for me to be aligned with women and support them in the way that I felt that they needed to be supported, it just became really, really clear, and obvious in the end. But yeah, my journey through to where I am now, I guess, has been interesting in the fact that I never ever picked to be a midwife at all. Used to work for universities. So my last major, role was I was a business manager at I think UWA, and then Slade and I had a massive change where we both quit our jobs, sold our house, and bought a one-way ticket to New Zealand. And then the money that we made on the house, we just traveled. And we traveled for nearly 2 years and then based ourselves in New Zealand and then, also traveled South America. And so it was amazing. It was a great time. And whilst we were away, I did a lot of, I suppose it was probably what people would call like that dark night of the soul period where you're like, what am I doing? Blah. And I remember when I quit my role, I remember saying to Slade, like, my job contributes nothing to society. That I'm pushing pen on paper, shifting numbers around, but I contribute nothing to society. That was just like such a big thing for me. And at the time and previously, just through friends, I'd already, sort of been involved in doing like activism work around like women, like took part in like International Women's Day. We did these marches, and even from when I was younger, I did all sorts of volunteer roles where when I think back now, I'm like, what the hell compelled me to like want to do that? Like I did Meals on Wheels, like taking meals around to like the elderly, who lived alone and things like this. But always like women's issues, I was very interested in, or I don't know, just stuff that I kind of gravitated towards. So then anyway, when we were in New Zealand, initially we thought we were going to settle in New Zealand. So I was going to like look at midwifery there. And the only reason midwifery like popped up was because when I was still here, I used to do tuna massage on the side, right? It was just like a side gig. And then one of my girlfriend's mums came from massage. So she's a girl from my culture. And so they're from the Cocos and Christmas Islands as well. I'm massaging her mum, and just out of the blue, she goes, "You should be a midwife." And I was just like, what? Random, because I had nothing to do with health or anything, right? But she said to me that one of my great aunts was a traditional midwife, in our culture. And I kind of knew that loosely, but, wasn't really aware of what that meant exactly. And the only stories that I heard about her was that she was a single mum, which is controversial in itself. And she was that great aunt where when she came to visit, and you all have to go and like pay respects to her, right? I remember all my other cousins were like absolutely petrified of her because she was so fierce, and you could sit there and we'd have to cop a lecture. But I really loved her, and when I found out like she was actually a single mum, you know what I mean? And so in our culture, that's a really big thing. And then probably her lecturing us was so that she didn't want us to kind of like, fall into the same pathway or trap that she did, for getting pregnant out of wedlock, because that's such a big thing, right? Taboo in our culture. But anyway, the stories that I heard about her was that she used to massage the women when they were pregnant. And then she was also, someone you'd go to after you'd given birth, because she would massage your womb and make sure everything was all in place. And they also said that she was able to, like when babies were breech, she would massage the baby, the mum, and somehow turn the babies. But like in context, she obviously wasn't like formally trained or anything like that. But like within our culture, we have like these traditional midwives. But I don't know who she learned from, and I don't know how, she played that role in the community. But there's a lot of faith involved. So there is a lot of like this is your skill or your ability that comes from God. And so, apart from the physical aspects of, doing the massages or whatever, they would use prayer, right? Prayer. And then as recently, I've been doing a dive into like the Malay people and like the traditional midwives and everything. There's like some really cool kind of stories tied into like mythology and the legends. So one of the ways, like in midwifery, or to be like the traditional midwife, you would get chosen by an elder who kind of sees something in you, right? And so another way is if your mum or your grandmother was a midwife, a traditional midwife, and then it would get passed down to you. If you had the acumen and the interest or whatever, and the knowledge was actually, it's secret knowledge. So it's not like you can just, get the information anywhere or wherever, Nothing was really written down either. But the other way as well is if you were, in a sense, like divinely chosen, right? Because I guess it's part of your the karmic pathway, for yourself. And so there's a legend that says like the other way that you can become that is when, you're someone who has no interest in anything like that anyway, and then you find yourself in a position where you have to support a woman in labor and there's nobody else. Like this woman is pregnant, she suddenly goes into labor and then there's nobody around, right? And then you end up supporting this woman. And then in that space, you know what you need to do without being taught. And it's because you get the guidance of who they call these 7 midwives come in and kind of imbue you with the knowledge, supernaturally to support the woman. And so then I was like, who are these like 7 midwives, And then when I sort of, look at the legend, there's some ties to the Hindu, the pranayama apparently, but these 7 midwives are at the fairies. They're actually like, this is how it's described, they're like princess fairies who got asked by the queen of the fairies to come and support her when she was pregnant and in birth. And so each of these 7 fairies had, they each have a specific like skill or whatever for pregnancy, in labor and birth and everything like that. So I was just like, wow, this is pretty cool. And that so resonated with me because so when we were in New Zealand and I was like, midwifery, what is this all about? And then I sort of did a little bit of reading and research of midwifery in New Zealand. I was like, wow, this is really cool because they're autonomous practitioners. And for me, that just made so much sense in that, they follow the mum all the way through, right? And also that there were these traditional and cultural practices that were kind of, woven in because to me, of course. So then my dad got sick. And so we made the decision to come back to Australia. And then once like retrained and then he started working. So then I was like, okay, let's see what this midwifery thing's all about. And so initially I never had the marks when I finished high school to be able to just apply. So I did the adult pathway. So you sat like you do like this 6-week course to do the stat. I think it's called the stat exams or something. And so
Yeah,
that gives you a mark.
bridging it. Bridging, I think
Yeah,
it's
like
called now.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so then that gave you a mark. But then, so because I applied at the Curtin course, because at the time it was direct entry midwifery, so you didn't have to be a nurse first. Apparently, it was very competitive, and so you also have to sit an interview, right? And so I was like, here we go, boom. And then I got a letter to say that I got acceptance, and so that really shocked the hell out of me because I was like, oh my God, like, am I really going to do this? But I still wasn't convinced on it either. And so I did my training 3 years, and the whole time, I think on reflection, it was simultaneously got confusion, being angry, because what I felt midwifery was and and what I felt like I needed or wanted to learn in how to support a woman in through the whole thing wasn't what I was getting. And so things like when I sort of found out like the rates of postnatal depression, I was like, what's postnatal depression? Like, I don't know anyone in my my culture who had postnatal depression. Breastfeeding issues, what is that? Like, why can't they just feed their babies, Because again, like in my culture, that's what, yeah, women breastfed their babies. And then if you couldn't, we had wet nurses. So that's not even an issue. Because I had a wet nurse, when I was a baby, because my mum had very small flat nipples apparently. And initially, her milk didn't come in, I don't know, on time or whatever. So I had a wet nurse. And then I also experienced a lot of trauma as a student. And again, I didn't recognize it at a time, but there was certain key things that I remember. One of the girls in the class, she's a masseuse as well. So we used to swap massages. giving massages to each other. And I remember one time she came and gave me a massage and she was working on my shoulders. And suddenly I had this flash of a memory of when I was a student on prac the year before and I supported this mum and I witnessed what was happening to her. I connected that memory to a memory that I personally experienced as a young woman. And I just burst into tears and I had a massive release and it was violation. And I came out of that massage and I was like, holy shit, that was violation. I felt violated for that woman because that woman was being violated with what I saw. Do you know what I mean? And what I felt in my body. And at the time, I remember when I was witnessing that as a student, I knew, like, I stepped outside of my body and I was standing on the side, observing myself, observing this woman. You know, I haven't, I don't know, with this weird ability to just be able to detach like that. But yeah, and then obviously, you know, it's stored in the body and it's my shoulders. And when she was working on it, I had this release and I was like, violation. And then another memory I had was I was on the like a cesarean section. It was just, they were just elective cesareans. And I remember this baby being taken out. It was just routine, being taken over to the cot. And then this baby, so it was a baby boy and it was weaning. It was weaning as they were taking it over. And like the staff were like, oh, you know, the baby, you know, oh, cute. No, he's weaning himself, like, you know, his plumbing works or some bullshit thing like that they were saying. But for me, as that student witnessing that, what I felt was how I was like, that baby is so fucking sorry. I hope it's okay to swear. That
We swear.
baby
Yeah, we
is
swear.
so fucking petrified and so scared. It's pissing itself. That's what I felt, you know? It was crazy, but again, you know, because it's like this is a norm of what you see, you know, in the training. So I just detach, right? And honestly, I got to the end of my course and I was just like, nah, I can't do this. I can't be a midwife in this system. I can't work in the hospital. It was a woman that kept me in to continue the course. And it was a woman that kept me in to stay and be registered, right? And so the first woman was a woman who had, that I supported as a student. So when you're a student midwife, you have to follow these women, right, as part of your study. And at the time, you could still follow women who home birth with the community midwifery program. It was so awesome. And I remember it was a first time mum, and her midwife ended up being my mentor when I went out into private practice, you know, years later. I love her so much, Linda. But she was a midwife. And I just remember this woman, she gave birth in the pool in her lounge. And she just had a squeezy ball, you know, with the contractions. And then I just remember she had like these wooden blinds in her lounge. And the sun was setting as she gave birth to her baby. It was so beautiful, so simple. And then, and just these memories of like, you know, and we got her out of the pool and then her husband's feeding her while we're, you know, while she's feeding her baby and we're just sitting around talking and, you know, we might have done like, I don't know, a blood pressure or whatever and just doing these really basic checks or whatever. And then we helped her to the shower, you know, and then we tucked her up in bed and then, you know, tidied up a little bit. And then we drove home. And I just remember after all of that, I'm driving home and I'm listening to Sade's song, Baby Father, and this song comes on and I just burst into tears. And I'm just like, that is the most amazing, beautiful, simple, right, thing I've ever witnessed. And I had been to 2 births previously of my niece and nephew in the hospital, and they were great. Like, you know, no trauma, nothing happened. They just birthed their babies because that's what we believe in my culture. You just birth your babies. But this was something else. You know, this was just incredible. And so that kind of kept me going despite all the other experiences. And then in my final year of study, so there was a woman, it was another home birth and first time mum as well. And she had she was like, she was a naturopath, she just believed in all like, all the holistic things, right? Like every woman wants. And she also had like fear around the hospital because of some stuff that had happened to her, I think when she was younger or something. And so she was like, no, not birthing in the hospital. So she booked under the home birth program, community midwifery, blah, 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 had me as a private as a student. And it was awesome. But when she went into labor, the midwife that she was assigned was on leave or on holidays or something. So she was gutted about that. But she didn't know that until the day that she gave birth. And we didn't know that until, So what happened was she had called me, I think it was like 6 o'clock in the morning or something, and said, oh, I've been contracting all night. And she was getting like really upset and she's crying. Because she said, I can't handle this, la, la, la. And I said, oh, where's your husband, and he was there, but apparently he wasn't, that helpful. So I said, have you called the midwife? And she's like, yeah, she's rang and left a message. And I said, look, okay, I'm happy, I'll come over because I'm expecting the midwife's going to get there anyway because she's in labor. So I rock up. And so I just comforted her, right? So I calmed her down, got her breathing through the contractions. And this is me in my, I suppose, naivety, or whether I just think, well, because I'm in training to be a midwife and this is what a midwife would do. And I'm expecting her midwife is going to be coming anytime now, right? And she lived way north of the river as well. So I listened to the baby and I used a pinard because I trained myself as a student to like, I really love, there's something very organic about that, instead of like with the Doppler. So I trained myself to use a pinard. So I had to listen and I said, oh yeah, baby's heart rate is this, da, 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 like doing all the things that your training tells you. And so she calmed down and then I realized the midwife isn't here yet. And so I said to her husband, like, have you heard from the midwife? And he's like, no. And I said, do you want to call her again? Like, because I think it's been like at least an hour since I got here. And so then he rings up and then a different midwife answers the phone. No idea about her. And she says, oh, that midwife is on leave or something. Right. And so she's like, oh, okay, right. I'm going to have to like rearrange my day basically. And then the husband said, oh, our student midwife is, and she goes, oh, okay. So then anyway, she says she'll be on her way. So I think she got to us like maybe an hour later sort of thing. And by then the woman had come down. The husband had set the pool up and filled the water, and that she, because I said to her, like, get in the pool, and and I just remember as a student, like everything was lovely, it was beautiful, calm, just normal. And then as soon as that midwife walked in, I just had this feeling of like, oh, I don't think she's a home birth midwife,
Mm.
And then as she's sitting there, she introduces herself and start talking. And then she says, yeah, she used to work, she's been working in the hospital, like in the country, da, da, da. And then she'd moved down and she just wanted to like step out and do home birth. And I'm just like, oh, she's not a home birth midwife.
You can feel their energy. You can feel
Oh,
the fear.
totally,
Why isn't this happening? You can feel the fear
totally.
of any person who is in not of trust, can't
Yes,
you? Yeah.
absolutely. And then, so then anyway, so it's fine, talking, everything's chill or whatever. And then, I think, so then my mum got hot, and she needed to go to the toilet. So I said, well, let's just get out of the pool then, go to the toilet. And then when she got out, when she went to the toilet, when she was coming back, the midwife then goes, shall we do an examination just to see how far along you are? All right? Yeah. And so she's like, yes, I need to know. Of course, in hindsight, I think she was approaching transition, right? Because she was getting like lots of pressure and she was just all at that kind of like, nothing's comfortable anymore. So of course, when the midwife says, hey, do you want this? And she's like, yes. And she lies back on the bed. And so the midwife does an examination and then she goes, oh, you've got bulging membranes. Shall we just break this? And to make things go quicker. And before I could say, oh, shall we, are you sure you want to do that? Or, do you want to, talk about it, whatever. The woman just goes, yes. And so the midwife breaks her waters, and then there's meconium. And when I say, and again, now in hindsight, right, on reflection, um, when I said meconium, it was like a tinge of color in it, But I will never forget the midwife. There was this sense of relief from the midwife. I could feel it. She was just like, yes, meconium,
We get to the
right? She
hospital.
didn't say it, but like I could feel it. It was like, yes, meconium. And I literally saw her like taking her gloves off in this particular way. And she was like, oh, and she says, there's meconium. We're going to have to transfer in. She goes, so I'm just going to go and make some phone calls and blah, blah, blah. And off she goes, right? And this woman, my mum is like still on the bed, her legs are, apart. And she's burst into tears, you know, and I'm just like having to console her. And I said, it's fine. Look, it's a little bit meconium. The baby is fine. I just did the heart rate. Everything's all good. I know this is not what you want, but we have to pivot here, right? And I'm just like, let's just get it together, and we're going to prepare for giving birth in the hospital. It's going to be fine. And then she's like, will you come with me? And I said, yeah, I'm going to be coming with you, So anyway, so she goes into, I think she calls the ambulance. Anyway, so we go into the hospital, and literally, she wanted to wait until her best friend came to support her. And literally she gave birth within like 45 minutes of, getting to the hospital.
So she was in
And
transition at that
she
point.
was just in transition, and there was nothing wrong. And anyway,
Mhm.
so then after that, she was so furious about that whole situation. So she just blocked the midwife from like contacting her afterwards for the postpartum care, right? Didn't have any contact with them. And so then and I don't know whether she put a complaint in or what, but then they reviewed her case file because it's like, well, why is this woman not getting in touch or whatever it was? And then they saw in the notes the midwife had written that when she arrived at the woman's home, her student midwife was already there. So then I get called into the office with the head of school and I think one of our senior unit coordinator or whatever was her title. And basically I got taken over the coals. It's your usual practice. I'm like rocking. And I was sitting there in confusion. I was like, what is going on here? And so basically that what they're saying is because the university's insurance, something to do with insurance, like, wouldn't cover me, like if anything were to go wrong. And so basically they, interrogated me. That's what it felt like what I did. And I said, blah, 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 and then like, well, what would happen if you didn't get the baby's heart rate? If there was some kind, I said, I would have rung an ambulance. I'm like, why am I in trouble when the midwife, do you know what I mean? Like the program didn't even they didn't even know she was in labor. And there was obviously no handover from the midwives, between the two midwives, because that midwife, when the husband rang up, she had no idea that this woman was was part of their program and all of that, right? So anyway, so I got into trouble and over it. And really that was just like the first. Do you know what I mean? It was like, it should have been like, Norafiah, like, well, this is going to be an issue. so after that, because I was so disappointed, there wasn't even anything like, okay, look, we have to reprimand you because, our insurance, blah, 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 blah. But well done, because, that woman, she felt supported, you did the right thing, whatever, you acted like, like we would be happy to have you graduate because you know what to do when you're a midwife, right? There was none of that.
No,
So,
because being a midwife doesn't mean about supporting women, doesn't it? It means supporting the system and the policies and procedures based
yeah.
on what the government gives. Because you're a puppet on
Yeah.
a string, and that's what you're there to support. And if you step outside the box, you're a
Yes.
bad little girl.
Yes, and that's what I learned basically. And so, because initially I was kind of like, so So, get to the end of my course, and then I hand in my portfolio. I'm like, fuck it, I'm done. No, that's it. Thank God. And then I remember one of the women that I had previously followed, Jo, who is beautiful. I love her. She'd called me up and she said, do you need another mum for your books, for your portfolio? Because she said, I've got a friend. She was supposed to be booked with the community midwifery program, but she had some health condition that came up, and so she has to give birth in the hospital now. And I was like, no, thank God I'm done. So I don't think I want to, register as a midwife, and I don't need any more women. She goes, oh, can you still support her? And I said to her, look, just give her my number. I'm happy to talk to her, and I don't know, whatever I can do, sort of thing. Anyway, the next morning, the woman's sister rang me up to say waters had released. She's in labor, and then they're en route to the hospital, and she really wants me to be there, right, to support her. And I was like, oh, gosh, oh, and I can't say no. I couldn't say no. So I said, yep, no problem. So I meet this woman in the bathroom in the hospital, and she's in labor, she's contracting. It was amazing. So I'm like, hi, da. And then boom, I get into supporting her. She had her CMP midwife there as well. And it was the first time, I'm ever so grateful for this birth, and this is what kept me in. I saw a woman. So when I was a student, I heard this whole thing around a woman transforms into a goddess when she's in labor, right? Never saw it. I never saw it. And so I was kind of like, what is this thing they keep saying, right?
Because you're witnessing birth in hospital?
Correct.
Right, okay. So now and whereabouts is this birth that you're about to tell us?
This is in a hospital. Yeah, this is in a hospital.
Yep.
But this mum, and I guess her midwife just kind of let her do a thing because, she had me as support, her sister and her husband as well, right? The hospital was Swan Districts. It's closed down now, but that was a great little hospital. I actually worked there after I graduated. But anyway, so I go in, I'm supporting her, and I watched and I witnessed her. Oh my God, how she moved her body. Afterwards, I find out she was she did MMA, MMA fighting. But that's what she did. She trained in that, right? But in the labor, she was moving her body, and it was just beautiful. And then when she birthed this baby, she was in a lunge position on the bed, and she had one arm around my head, the other arm around her husband. And I just remember we were forward to forward. And then she just and to me, she was breathing, and this baby's head just comes out, and I'm looking down like this, and I could see this baby's head come out, and then this baby's just birthed, and poof, you get hit with oxytocin, and I'm just like, wow, okay, this is why I'm here. So I'm here. So then I registered, and then carry on, And then, but initially when I came out, I got a contract with Swan Districts, and then also Fiona Stanley, and because Fiona Stanley had just opened, so I was part of the inaugural staff. So I had I think I worked at Swan Districts for something like 3 months, because when I applied for the job, I said, I've been accepted with Fiona Stanley, but they don't open until November, so I can only work here until that time. So, and they gave me the contract, which is, I suppose, a little bit unusual because I was a new graduate. Normally, you have to go, they want you to be on a graduate program for a year and you have to work full time. But I never worked full time. I was always on a 0.6, I think. So 3 days a week or whatever it was. And so then I went from there to then at Fiona Stanley. And at Fiona Stanley, it was the same. I was only a 0.6. So I was never working full time. But back then, you could set up as a private midwife, right? So I just had to get the insurance and and register to work as a private midwife. And because I said to Slade, if I'm going to do this, I said I have to do home births. That's the only place. Initially, in this interim, yep, I'll work in the system in a hospital, but the bare minimum that we can afford for me to do it. And then I remember then Jo, I love this is why I so love her. She trusted me. And when I was a student back before, and both me and her midwife never made it to her birth in the hospital, because she just birthed so quick without us. Anyway, she rang me up when I was on a hike, and she goes, "What are you doing in October?" And this is like earlier in the year, right? And I was like, nothing. I don't know what's going on. I'm thinking she's like planning a party, right? And she goes, "I've just found out I'm pregnant." And she goes, "I don't know how I feel about it." And she goes, "But I want you to be my midwife, so you better get your shit together." So I shat myself because I'm thinking, what? Why? I can't do this, like it's Jo, I can't do this. And I thought when she said you better get your shit together, that she meant like, emotionally, mentally, like, spiritually, I had to get my shit together. But she meant like, with the equipment and all of that, like get myself set up. So I was just like so nervous. And then I actually asked, by then I had reconnected with that other midwife. She was a private midwife by then. I asked her to be my backup and to support me. And it was beautiful. And it was a very hard birth for Jo. And her birth gifted me the ways to support and to also to see, like when women have posterior births, they're brutal, right? It's so hectic. And she still birthed a baby. But yeah, the level of trust she had in me, but also the trust that I had in her was like this, mutual relationship. And she births her baby, and like boom, Mackenzie comes out at the end very quickly, and that was kind of like the start of my journey, really into for me into midwifery. But I was always very insecure about it because it was because of the conflict of what I felt inside, like intuitively, instinctively, whatever, what I wanted to do versus what I was seeing, or like an expectation of what I had to do. And that's to do with conduct and the guidelines and all of that. You know what I mean? So yeah, so I was, you know, very internal. I was very like, whenever I had to kind of deal with, all the things that you have to do. But when I'm in the space with a woman, when it's just me and her, that's a whole different kettle of fish. Do you know what I mean? When I then gave myself permission to then just like, listen, just do the midwifery that you want to do, that just do that. Like, there's no one checking over your shoulder here, you know? When you're in private practice, you have to be autonomous. You're accountable to the woman, like be in integrity. And so all the women that I've supported when I was a private midwife, that's what they taught me. And the more they trusted me, like I just trusted them implicitly, like whatever they told me. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't kind of looking at their stories on paper of like, ooh, that's risky, ooh, I'd just be like, okay, here's a woman sitting in front of me, and I'm listening to her story, and I'm listening to what is it that she wanted, what her wishes are. And then I'm feeling like, okay, what's the best way? How's the best way that I'm going to support her to be able to get her to where she wants to go, or what she wants to achieve? And if it means that I need to refer her to someone, or I'm not the best person to support her, then I would just say, listen, I think you'll be better off, being in touch with this person instead. Do you know what I mean? But it's when I started to give myself permission, that's when all the magic started to happen. When I say the magic, it's the things where, how do you prove that, Where's the research study that says that's a thing? Yeah,
Where's the
so,
papers to prove women can just give birth,
yeah.
especially in this system that we find ourselves in. But anytime you do look into history of birth, birth has always been, from what I have gathered and seen and witnessed and heard, birth has always been something that has been programmed or put into us that is a medical emergency or is a life or death event, in which when you start to look away from the reshape your mind to thinking, well, how are we here today? We're here today because birth is birth and women just give birth, and
Yeah.
women were giving birth for thousands of years at home. And um, we have been told that we need to trust so much in the system. But really, when you actually open your eyes and see the way we are all on these puppet strings, and everything comes down to insurance, everything is to protect somebody because of money, right? So unfortunately, we've lost birth in this. And I've been writing down a few little notes here because I want to, there's a few questions I want to ask, but one thing I really just want to say is one of the biggest things I have learned by witnessing your story and your journey is that women, well, all humans, but women particularly, are intuitive. We're intuitive beings, and we have callings and we have thoughts. And another thing I just really want to clarify is that we and yourself have pivoted throughout your life. You haven't been able to plan where you are today and
Mm,
the what you did, right? And
mm,
so if you're listening to us today in this conversation, I just really want you to highlight that no matter where you are in your life, if you've spent years in trying to do a career or you've been studying and you have a calling
mm,
to do something different, you're allowed to also change your mind. Because I think
yeah.
as a society, we have lost that. And I think there's been a lot of judgment. And I heard that a lot as a kid too. I remember hearing it from adults that, oh, she's doing something new again. Like, you hear a lot of judgment around women changing their mind or doing a different job, or she spent 4 years at university and she never went on to do the job. She went on to do something different. And there's so
Yeah.
much actually talk about that then we think that we're not allowed to change our mind and completely pivot. And I was actually just listening to a podcast the other day when Mel Robbins was interviewing Jay Shetty, and he was talking about this as well, about the permission. And it made me resonate because, you think, like, I've had those things of like, well, I'm a hairdresser. Am I allowed to do a podcast? Or I don't know. I didn't finish school and I can't spell and I'm not smart enough and I'm not clever enough. I can't do this. And I just wonder if the person sitting with us here today listening is also has that talk in their mind. And I also just want to step into the permission that you can
Mm,
change your mind and pivot. And I'm looking at you today, Naf, through the computer, and I'm hearing you and I'm seeing that you have continued to follow the intuitive callings of
mm,
just what has felt right.
mm.
And that is it. What's felt right by you and what's felt right in your body. And that is not something I learnt until I met you how to do.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Yeah, and that's
Because
something
it's
that
a
I've
power.
actually had to learn. I've had to learn myself as well, hun. So like, and this is what I've understood. Like my journey to with what I'm doing and what I share with women, it's not something that I didn't experience or do myself. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost like what I'm kind of teaching or showing is like this was my pathway. This is how I did it. Doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing, but I think by me kind of sharing, and it's like with anyone, like when you've been through a certain experience and get out the other side, by you sharing, it gives other people permission, like, oh wow, they did that, they can do that, so why can't I do that? Do you know what I mean? And there's nothing to say that you can't, except
Mm,
yourself. And I think that to me, because this is how I like to learn, I want to learn from someone who has actually done it. Not like the lived experience, not just like the books, because yeah, the book smarts really doesn't mean anything if you can't apply it in real life, or it doesn't add value to somebody in real life. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, just information. It's just information, but like, where's the meaning, in that for the person, and how can they apply it? It's got to be applicable. But yeah, in the pivoting thing as well, I feel fortunate that I've never been one to like, oh, I'm a this or I'm a that in terms of like, career. I've never ever been like that. I've always just fallen into my jobs, even when I was working at the university. Like that was such a random thing, I was in a job that I didn't even have any qualifications for.
I really resonate. I can look back and
Yeah.
I think, when I opened the salon, we were traveling around Australia, and
Mm.
when I posted the photo of me holding the keys to the salon, and the salon was a huge part of my journey and part of
Yeah.
my like biggest catalyst of a level up in my life, really. And
Yes.
I remember just posting the photo of me, and when I'd just be like, "Oh, we've just signed a 3-year lease to a salon, and we had just arrived into the state 2 weeks prior, and we didn't know
Yeah.
anyone." And all the fear, everybody else's
Yes.
fear projected onto you, and you're like,
Yeah.
"Poof," with your shield, like, "Don't put your fear onto
Yeah.
me." And
Yeah.
"How are you going to do it? And you don't know anyone. And what was their profit and loss statement like of the old business?" And I'm like, "Nah, I don't need any of that. Like, I can make this work
Love it.
just because it feels right." And I've carried on that journey, and I can see that I'm
Mm.
sat across the room from somebody else, and they're like, "What the fuck? That doesn't make sense. Like, what? How?" And I'm like, "Stop trying to understand me, because you're never going to get."
That's right. Yeah, yeah,
So I
that's
can
right.
resonate. And then it's one day it's like, "Oh, I'm like, we want to move home now. We want to get land and completely
Mm.
change our life again." And it's like,
Yes.
"Why? Just feels right. It
Yeah,
just had
that's
feels
right.
right." And that's what you're going to do. And
Yeah.
you're going to buy this house. And so I really resonate with that, because I just don't see there's any other way to live than just
No, I
chopping
know.
and changing and taking big risks and taking that
Yes,
leap of faith, not
yes,
trusting that you're always going to be held.
absolutely. And that's really big for a lot of people, I think, because I mean, like you, like I'm really blessed with an amazing partner, right? And they just have our backs, regardless of what crazy shit you want to do. They just like find a way to make it happen.
Mhm.
But yeah, and I can appreciate that some people may not be in the same situation, but I still don't think that should stop you. Do you know what I mean? From like, yeah, doing pivoting, like whatever it is, because life's too short. And the other thing too is we get so hung up on the identity of like we are this or we are that. And so then if you're no longer that, then what are you? Do you know what I mean? Well, you are still you. You are a human being, you're a spirit, you know what I mean? That doesn't define you, even if you feel that's the only way that you can make a living. But yeah, and I had to really like, towards the end, like COVID was just crazy time. And yeah, and I was never, given that I was in private practice anyway, and I had my own, little business, I was just like, you know, masking, whatever. I worked for a beautiful, amazing family GP practice. And in the end, yeah, we kind of had to part ways. But initially, like before the whole COVID thing, oh my God, they were amazing to work with because they supported what I did, And I remember that because we'd moved down here to Rockingham by then. And I just remember one of my colleagues at the hospital said, "Oh, my local GP is looking for a midwife in their practice. I think you'd be really good there." And I was just like, "Nah, I don't want to work. I don't want to work in a GP practice. Like what? No, I won't be doing my own thing." I just saw myself. I'm just gonna potter around. I'm just gonna be like the local midwife in the village. That's just how I saw myself. But anyway, I remember on one of my days off, just this voice going, "Ring him up. Just ring him up," because she got me the dad's business card. And I'm sitting here, I was like, fuck it, okay, fine, I'll ring up and just see what this is all about. And I rang up and I spoke to dad, and he was beautiful. And and I told him, I was like, I'm doing this, da, 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 da. One of the girls I work with said, "You're looking for a midwife." And he said, "Yep, come on in," and went into their practice to chat with him. And on the way over, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to like lay it out, like what I do and all this holistic stuff and whatever, this is what my belief is and everything like that. Just see what happens. They're either going to say, yes, brilliant, whatever, or they're like, maybe you're not a right fit, right? So, but I rock up at their office and the practice, and he shows me around. And then I meet his daughter, Christabel, love, lots of energy and just amazing. And then they had like a notice board up, and then on the notice board was a little flyer that they had up, and it was advertising that they had Ibu Robin Lim, who is a midwife who runs that Bumi Sehat midwifery birth center in Bali, right? And I went, oh, should I know about it? And then the dad was saying, oh yes, they met. I can't remember where they said they met her and they asked her to come and give a talk at their practice. And I was like, okay, right. This changes things for me. So yeah, when they offered a like a contract to work at their practice, I would yes, and it was brilliant because if you want to talk about collaboration, like Christabel and I had a great working relationship. I think I only did like one or 2 days. 1 or 2 days a week. And she had her office. And then, if a woman came in, you wanted the more kind of holistic kind of stuff, as in terms of like alternative or complementary therapies, that she wanted to. So then she'd say, I'll have a chat with Norafiah about that. And if I had a mum who I needed like some, doctor import or, whatever to do with the medication, even though there were certain medications that I could prescribe, I would just say no, like I would refer them to go, to just go into booking with Christabel. I could just like ring her, or she'd just come into the office, or I just go into her. Do you know what I mean? It was just like this beautiful relationship. And yeah, I kind of miss like working with them as well. And then when COVID hit, like, and then obviously everything changed, and they always respected like where I stood on things, so I didn't get the vaccinations, I didn't get the mask. And then that was when the start of the reporting happened, basically, because somebody who I would think is like, on Facebook, you're like a friend of a friend, like, because I have like my page. I've got like the business page and then my personal page. And so my personal page is like the private, and the settings is friends or friends or friends or whatever, whereas the other one's public. And there was a couple of posts that I did on my business page, which I didn't think was anything controversial. And I certainly didn't think that it because at that time, so and I think still now, like all the health professionals, you are gagged. You can't say shit about shit, right? And so
So in other words, I'm just going to say it, if you are under the government and you speak out about vaccines, you can have your registration lost from you. So when us little ants think, oh, but if this was something wrong, or if there's
yeah,
something bad about this, they were going to speak out. Well, actually, they can't.
yeah, that's right. Even though even the midwifery, guidelines, the professional guidelines that we have, says about informed consent. There is a policy, the WA consent to treatment policy. That's an actual policy that you have to get informed consent. Even with the vaccinations, in the manuals and all of this, right? It all says you have to get informed consent. Australian Healthcare Charter. But anyway, so there was 2 posts that I put up. So one, this is on my business page. One, I said, if you present to clinic and you're not wearing a mask, I'm just going to assume you've got like a medical exemption, and under the Privacy Act, I can't enforce or ask. That's your personal business, right? If anyone's had the COVID vaccination, I said, could they please refrain from coming to clinic for at least 2 weeks after they've had the vaccinations? I said, because I've heard that this issue around shedding, right? And I said, and because I've got obligated and duty bound to kind of protect, the other clients, I said, yeah, would you mind, just doing that? That's all I said. And then the second post I put up it was a panel of all these like doctors and scientists, experts in their fields, and they were actually discussing COVID and then, the rolling out of the vaccine, and also the technology around the mRNA technology and right? And I just posted that up and said something of interest, because I was like, well, they're not saying one way or another. They're just kind of discussing, like, because it's a big deal with what's happening in the world right now, right? And then I don't know whatever, can't remember the time frame, maybe a couple of weeks or a month later was when I got the complaint came in from APRA to say, yeah, under investigation. Somebody put this complaint in, and this is where I just feel so there's no sisterhood, right? So the person had screenshotted those 2 things from my business page, which is, yep, it's public, so yep, whatever. But they had also screenshotted posts that I'd made on private page, right? And these were things that I'd posted up, because you know me, I'm a bit tongue in cheek, right? And Slade and I, share stuff. We've always done it, even before I was a midwife. I was already down the vaccination rabbit hole, like in all the, we are Mr. and Mrs. Conspiracy 1-on-1, right? So nobody who's friends with us surprise, and if you don't agree with their views, they just don't comment, whatever, like they don't give a shit, right? But whoever this person was, they screenshotted from my private page. I don't know, it must have been like nearly a month's worth of stuff that I posted up. And a lot of them were just like these cheeky memes about, COVID and whatever. Screenshotted them. There was, I don't know, something like 20 things, and this was all attached to the complaint. And I was like, what the actual fuck? We were like laughing, but obviously I was kind of like, this is just insane. It was such an insane time, And so, I had to answer to all of that. And I remember at the time we were actually on holidays, and we had gone to Naraloo. So picture me. So whilst we are en route up to Naraloo where there's hardly any reception, right? I'm still having to communicate with the lawyers from the insurers, Mega. And so they're sending me stuff, that they're doing for me. And then I had to kind of like see it and just, add some things or whatever. And so, picture me on one of the days, I have to go outside of our accommodation. We're in like this remote place. I have to found a little mound that I had to stand with my phone, holding it up, going, where the fuck can I get some signal? Because I've got this thing that needs to come in that I need to look at and answer them straight away type of thing. Oh my God, it was just so crazy. But through that time, it was just then became relentless, because then after that, it was like, case, right, with your situation. Boom, I knew, oh, the doctor's going to report me for this. Boom, there's another one. And then, another transfer in, which again, private midwives, and this is what really irrates me. And look, all the private midwives would be on the same page with this as well. It's like we transfer in with our client, because, either the woman wants to, has identified she needs to go in, she wants to go in, whatever the reason be. And so we respect that decision and know her choice and go, yep, let's go in, or we've identified like, yes, this is the situation, spoken with the client, and then she then also, decides. And so then, yep, we're transferring in. But honestly, when you transfer in, and I don't know whether it's just me in particular, but the love's transfer was horrendous. I've never been met with so much hostility, not just towards me, but to my client. And there was nothing wrong. We transferred in for pain relief, right? And it was horrendous. And it was after that last transfer, that was when I was like, I fucking can't do this anymore. And then I got a complaint in made by the hospital about that. And I'm just like, what? And that was the last straw for me. And then I did the breath work, because, when it comes to like identity, I really had to like, fuck, right, what do I do here then? Like, this is way too much for me as a lone person to fucking keep dealing with this shit, because it's just going to keep happening. It takes so much of your time, mentally, emotionally, let alone financially, to be dealing with all of this. And then I did this breathwork session with Jake. And then, I had this conversation with my spirit, I guess, where it was just like, I'm lying there breathing. And then this voice goes, so what are you worried about? What are you afraid of? And I'm like, they're going to take away my livelihood, How am I going to earn my money? La, 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 la. And then they're like, dude, you have had that many jobs. Like, you just keep pivoting. You just find something else to do. Like, it's no biggie, like, whatever. And so I was like, oh, yeah, okay. And they're like, what else, And then I'm like, I'm going to go to jail. And then the boys, and this was what really shocked me. It's so weird, like you've done breath work, right? And then you're breathing. So like you're observing yourself breathing, and then you're experiencing, feeling what's going in your body. But then at the same time, like in my case, I've got this other voice going, so what else are you worried about? And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go to jail, please, Gates, and I'm gonna go to jail. And they're like, well, so what? Like, you can have a nice break. Have a break. While you're there, maybe you can enroll in a law degree or something, Just like learn some new shit. And I was like, oh yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose I could do that. Yeah, I love learning, right? And then the last bit was like, so what else? What else are you worried about? And I'm like, and for whatever reason, I guess it must be, when you get to that existential crisis moment, it always comes down to this. It's like, I'm going to die. And then the voice goes, oh, dude, you've been reincarnated 100,000 times over back into this life, to play this game again. You just want to keep coming back. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
It reminds me of what's that show? And it's based in Scotland. It reminds me of Outlander, right? Like I forgot her name now, but she is the nurse, right? And
Yeah.
she travels in time. So it's like based in, I don't know, the 1600s or whatever it may be. And then she comes back, she goes through a time portal and then comes back into this kind of time and then goes back. And so she's the healer, but the healer, if is also cast as the witch,
Yeah.
and she gets burnt on the stake because she is actually there to heal people, not to be controlled by the government and the systems
Mm.
who are basically operated by men. And it just, when you were just telling me that, I just think it's just that same dynamic. And anyone who's wanting to step out of that, they're
Mm.
cast as this really bad person,
Yeah.
when really every single woman you supported would say you are the woman that they've needed in their life, and is so thankful regardless of the outcome. And this is the thing with home birth, right? Is
Yeah.
regardless if you transfer or not, it's not a failure. That's just your
No,
journey. And that's
absolutely.
there to guide you and
Yeah.
teach you. And you're
Yeah.
right where you need to be always. So Naf, you did touch on having a release, and I'm just going to put under the assumption that the person that may be listening with us here today may not know what you mean by that. And I really would love to tie in your views on German new medicine, and coming back to your story about your shoulders, and that when you were receiving that massage, you touched on a point that brought in a memory. Can
Mm.
you please share with the person that is listening with us today your views on how the body stores and holds trauma? Let's just call it trauma. And that could be from a girl at school bullying you. Like, this could be micro traumas to the biggest
Mhm.
traumas, how they're stored in the body, and what it's like to actually have a release. And the reason I ask you this is because I'm starting to look at my daughters and my children's emotions, like the big cries and the tears, as a different way of like, okay, what's going on below the surface? Like, I just want to get your perspective on emotional releases, what's stored in the body, and if you could bring German new medicine into that, that would be
Yeah.
fantastic.
I'll just touch. So because I'm still kind of learning about German new medicine anyway, right? And it does absolutely resonate and make sense for me. A lot of the things that's coming out now in mainstream, right, it's to do with the body and how emotions and traumas are stored in the body. This has been around, if you like, the notion of this has been around for God knows how long. Because even before I sort of stepped into this, this kind of realm or area, back in the day, it's always been viewed as being like in the spiritual circles, like where, everyone knows about Louise Hayes, and then the work of like Barbara Ann Brennan, like these are people who are like quite known in and way back in the day, when I was younger, where if you're to do any kind of spiritual work, then when you learn about chakras and those kind of energy systems, then you learn that trauma is stored in the body. And so in all the diseases or ailments has like an emotional foundation. That's where it kind of starts, right? And so when I came across German new medicine, that just made complete sense to me. I think it's one of many things that is coming out now that will play or complete the whole in terms of like how our bodies actually work. And I think that is still gaining traction, right? And so, yeah, when I learned about German medicine, I'm like, yes, yep, totally vibe that. I'm nearly finishing biodynamic craniosacral therapy, right? BCS is such a bloody mouthful, but so it's like it's another branch, I suppose, of cranial psychotherapy. I've never had cranial psychotherapy before, but biodynamic cranial psychotherapy, whenever I want to do a deep dive into something, I have to have a complete body yes. That's how I go, okay, I need to do this. And so with BCST, the whole thing is you are holding space for the body. So it's a touch modality, but you don't do any manipulations, and it's not a massage. So the person lies down fully clothed, and then you then have certain placements where you put your hands, right? When you sit in this, you have to create or picture, they call it the biosphere. So if you like, imagine a bubble. I have to create a bubble around both me and the client. And before then, I also have to sit in a state of groundedness and being completely present. And so I've got to be in my body, right, and be completely aware. And then when I do this, it creates a field of resonance, because like we're frequencies as well. So it sets this resonant field. So then the person's system, then their body goes, this feels safe. I'm safe and I feel held. And so within that space, then it then triggers their health blueprint, the original health blueprint that, that we come in as that little fetus. We have this original health blueprint. And so that then kind of gets initiated, if you like. And so then within this space that you're holding for them, any potential for health, anything can happen, right? So at the very least, their nervous system is regulated. They feel a sense of calm and peace. They might feel discharges happening in their body. And so when we're talking about the traumas that are stored in your body, so, if it's in the tissues or in the muscles, so they might feel twitching, they might feel heat, they might feel cold or tremors or whatever, right? If there's any kind of emotions that need to be released around a trauma, then that could happen as well. Some of the people who've been at my table, they've had memory recall from when they were younger, right? And so there's a potentiality for all of that to kind of be released and let go from the system without having to visit and keep revisiting that trauma. Do you know what I mean? So like, to me, it's so much better than like talk therapy as an example, because you're not having to sit there and trying to recall and right? You're just like, hey, listen, if you've already done that in particular, if you've already done the whole talking thing, the last thing you want to do, or the next step that you have to do, is actually release it, let it go from your body. And this is one of the modalities. And I personally, and that's why I love this modality so much. And if anyone has an opportunity to go and do some work with a BCST practitioner, go and do it. When it comes to it should be another thing, another tool in your kit for like anything that you want to work on. So from my experience with BCST was a previous birth client. So she was a practitioner and she gave me a session on her table, because I was like, oh, what's that? Because I'm always curious about this sort of stuff. And in context, like I've done Reiki, like I'm a Reiki practitioner, and, I do Mahuna massage, and that's energetic, and has an energetic component as well. And I'm like, oh, what is this thing, So she gives me a session, literally I'm just lying there, and she just does 2 holes, I think. And in the session, I remember I know I'm in my body, and then I just hear and feel my breath, and I do this really big, deep breath in, and then I breathed out, and then another big breath in, and then I just breathed out, and then I kept breathing out. It was just like this, like down, 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 until I just stopped breathing. And then I'm not breathing, I've stopped, and I'm going, I've stopped breathing. And then I'm like, we don't actually have to breathe. Like we just absorb energy from the atmosphere. like as part of what feeds us, you know? And then because I then got into my mind about it, and then I then had this spontaneous like breathing in, but not like a, like that. It was just like I just breathed in, And then I was in this beautiful place of like, I knew I was in my body, but I was completely relaxed and still. And my mind, who normally, if people aren't picking up on, my mind's normally blah, 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 like this. It was still. I was calm, and I was in this place of like, I didn't know what time it was. I didn't know like what was around me, but I just felt I was in this amazing space. And so after I came out of that, I was like, what the hell was that? That was amazing. And then she, sent me to the website who she learned from, Body Intelligence. And as soon as I read through the modules, my whole body was just like, yes, 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 yes. And so it wasn't until 3 years later when I had the time and the money to be able to start doing it. And I'm just about finished. I've got one more seminar to do. But honestly, getting the sessions then because the course is done over 10 seminars, and you are learning anatomy. You are learning anatomy and physiology. I know it sounds very woo and like energetic, but it's not. You are not learning energy. You are literally, every seminar is on like, the skeletal system, the nervous system, the brain, all of this, right? And then you give sessions to each other, and wow. So why I'm passionate about this is it can take you back to when you are inside your mum, right? Because that space of the long tide is that space when we are a fetus, and we form ourselves as a fetus as well, in accordance with our original blueprint, that program, if you like. And they don't know. They don't know who creates that program. Yes, you might say the genes and whatever DNA comes from mum and dad, right? But we form ourselves specifically based on this original health blueprint where everything is perfect and we are whole. And there's potentiality in that space for anything and everything, right? And so you can actually recall, and again, it doesn't have to be like an actual mental like memory, but like through your body. But I've been able to recall myself forming myself as that fetus. And then one of the experiences when I was being held, and again, I think this hold was really, I think they started at the feet. They had one under the knee and then one at the shoulder or something, right? I felt myself form as a baby. So we formed from the bottom up, right? And I could feel coming from the bottom. I came up and to where the gut and everything is, and it felt like a Kundalini activation. It was all like sparkling like this. And then as I came up to my heart, I suddenly felt all this grief, right? And so in context, I've done a lot of work on my mother wound, so I know where the grief comes from. But then I had this grief, and then it kept coming up to my head, and then when it got to my head, I was like, I am such a serious baby. And then there was this voice that went, I have come here with purpose, right? And I was like, oh, what the hell, And then another session, the last seminar, this was really, epic for me. This is one that, and like, because I've had like loads and loads of experiences within the biodynamic cranium, but these two things was just like, what really then drives me in how I support women, because ultimately it's to do with the babies and ultimately it's ourselves, right? So this hold, one at the sacrum and one at the ethmoid, which is right here, and you're lying on your side and you're on the table, right? And I had this feeling that, I think I'm like a little fetus, and then I started to get this pressure on top of my head, and I was like, like that's bloody awful. What is that? And it was just like this pressing down on top of my head. And then I had it felt like an electric shock that came from the right side of my brain, went through to the left side of the brain, and then it ended in a point in the corner of my eye, the left side. And it was like this zap. And at the same time, this pressure on top of my head. And I was like, oh, this is really uncomfortable. And then the next minute, this awareness comes in, and it was, and I hear this, you are an immense spirit, right? And then at this exact moment, when you're a fetus, whatever size that I was, I am trying to squash and squeeze myself into a little body, a little physical body, right? And I realize that pressure on my head is like, it's the first time that I actually felt a physical boundary because, normally, naturally, like where we are and where we come from before we incarnate into the world, before we're born, we are our spirit. We are spirit. We are massive. We are uncontainable. And so that realization, like at that point, and I don't know, I'm a little fetus. I don't have a sense of like, what, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, I don't know. But at that exact moment in time, I'm trying to squash my spirit into a little body and feeling physical boundary for the first time. Of course, it's uncomfortable. Of course, it's horrible. How would you like to be squashed into a little box? You know what I mean? And then, if that wasn't like mind blowing enough, the same session, then it was a different hold, but again, I'm still lying on the side, almost like in a fetal hold, a fetus, when you lie on your side. So, so this one, I can feel myself as the baby floating in fluid, so in the amniotic fluid, right? And I can sort of feel like as if my whole body is like, like floating like this, the movements. Then the next minute, I then get a flash image of the lecture that we just had, and it shows a little picture. The lecturer had showed a little picture of like when we form as a tube, and before we close over, the bottom and the top is open, right? So our tail and our head is still open. So before it fully fuses, I saw that. And then the next minute, this voice drops in, and the voice says, "You are God's breath expressed." And I burst into tears on the table.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then I'm just like, wow. Right. So then it made everything in terms of what I learned, like whether it be through German New Medicine and all the stuff around trauma, like the works of Dr. Gabor Mate, like all the things that I had like, taken little pockets and, learned here and there or whatever. And also with energy work and spirituality, it all just kind of came together at that point. And I'm like, this is why the importance of how we treat and support mums in their pregnancy, in their birth, and in their postpartum. Because it's about us as a baby. It's about the babies. Because at every point, even before you're conceived, right, before that egg and sperm comes together, whatever happens to your mum and your dad, and we all know about epigenetics, and like, your ancestral line can actually have an impact on your health, right? Then this is this, this. Like it was so big. It's been such a big, what's the word? Coalescing, yeah, coming together of all this information, and not just through like what I've read, but importantly what I've experienced personally myself in my journey, right? How it all comes together. Why? And it feeds into like, yeah, why I do what I do, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I keep pivoting here and there and da da da. But ultimately it just keeps coming back. It just keeps coming back to this. And so in the birth space, it's big. It's so big. But birth is only the birth isn't the outcome. It's the whole journey for women, right? In the circles or the views, like, that how you give birth and how you support it influences or has an impact on how you then mother as you move in your life, right? It's so big.
actually, you're probably safe to say the first woman I've met who's completely in her body and completely in that energetic field. And when you do start to look at life in the way of that we are all energetics, it can really lead you to a beautiful path and to be around beautiful people. So firstly, I want to thank the person that's listening with us today that to have made it to the end. And if you have loved this episode, please send it to another woman or your pregnant mama friend who may need that inspiration and that trust, because me and Naf is sitting in with you today and we trust you to make the decision that's best for you and your body and enough. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts and all the women. I'm speaking on behalf of all the women that we know who have had the pleasure of having you within our space and help guide and support our journey, throughout pregnancy and birth, and the trust that you have in women and couples. That we have learnt so much and we have had the most beautiful births, and it's a huge thank you to you.
Oh, my pleasure, hun. It's been an absolute pleasure. Um, before we wrap up, can I just do like a little plug for the Maternity Consumer Network? Yeah, because I think just pivoting back to your original question about like what women need to take away, know your rights in birth, and I am on the committee for the Maternity Consumer Network. So they're a national maternity advocacy group. They're amazing. So I highly recommend women like, join and be and or donate some money so then they can continue to do their work. And so it was started by a woman, a mother, right? And all the women in as part of the organization that all do their work as volunteers. So nobody gets paid for this. And so one of the key things that I've been working with them on is the complaint process. So they also run training on informed consent, both to health professionals, but also anyone within the community, the mums. As part of your birth plan, you should be aware what your rights are even before you step foot and engage. So then you are aware of what your choices are basically. And then if you have had a traumatic birth or bad adverse outcomes within your birth, just know that there is a complaint pathway, and I encourage women to put a complaint in, because that's the only way that we can get some change happening within the system. Do you know what I mean? Like, rather than everyone just talking about it and saying, yes, we know, like it's all bad, it's all shit, and trying to you know, find ways to work around it, which it doesn't mean that you can't, but I think it's still important that, the impact and the effect that it has on you by, the things that were done to you without any informed consent, and the trauma that you experienced, that actually has to be shared. So, and the MCN actually will help you with that process. It doesn't cost anything either, unless we have to get like a expert opinion. Then there might just be like a couple $100 or something like that you may need to pay. But what it does mean then, if it's found that you have some legal recourse, then you've got this evidence to be able to say take to a lawyer or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So that's just what I wanted to kind of finish off, and just so that we pivot back to the question that you asked. Yeah, but thank you so
Thank
much, and I've
you.
really enjoyed this. But yeah, anytime. I love to have a good chat about all of this.
Yes, when we get the studio up and running, we've just purchased a sea container, and so we're hoping to transform it into like a little podcast studio. So once
Yes.
it's all up and running, we'll have to get you in person.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Awesome. Well, I need to run, but thank you so much for your time
My
today.
pleasure. My pleasure, hun.